Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen. With me today is longtime listener, poet laureate, and Taya Master Anne-Marie Young. This is your Daily Dose of Happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. Now, Anne-Marie, I'm trying to decide how to introduce our guest here. I'm trying to figure out, is he your countryman or is he my countryman? Because he's Irish, but he's in Chicago.
Which part of Ireland?
I'm from County Cork, so I would be Irish. I wouldn't be British.
Yeah, you're not British, are you?
No.
So I guess that makes him my countryman. I mean, all right, that's fair. Yeah, I think that's a good way to handle it. Sure. I was thinking, like, how do you describe that? I mean, that's the nature of what we deal with today, both with the fact that we're dealing with the internet, but also people move around and people live in different places, and you know, they may come from a particular location, but that doesn't mean they stay there. It gets rather confusing after a while, but we muddle through. It's okay. So our guest today is named Conor Cumeen, and Conor, I didn't even check with you earlier to see if I got your pronunciation right. I usually try to do that, but hopefully
pretty good.
Pretty good. Okay, good. Yeah, I mean, because I'm not really good with names, but I try and.
I've been called worse, Walt. Let's put it that way.
All right. Okay. Well, you know, I'll take better than average. That's good. But Conor has a very interesting story in that he's been through. Well, a lot of people have been through a lot of stuff in their lives. He's been through particularly a lot of stuff in his life, but he also has one of those rare qualities that we really value around here. He has the ability to laugh and smile at it anyway. And that, Anne-Marie, as you and I know, not only is that a valuable quality, it's one that you want to hang around with.
Absolutely.
I mean, wow, this is going to be good.
It's infectious, isn't it?
It is. It really is infectious. And that's the whole point. That's where your Daily Dose of Happy comes from. So anyway, well, Conor, first of all, welcome. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you. Delighted to be with you. I saw the title of the podcast and I said, I got to connect with these guys and gals.
We're so glad you did. So tell us your story. Give us the background.
Right. Well, basically what I say, Walt, is that I'm an Irishman now, happily exiled in Chicago, where I say the Guinness is good, the people are friendly, and I have been force-fed more corned beef and green beer than I ever had in Ireland. So that's the normal intro. And actually, that is true. I rarely, if ever, had corned beef when I was in Ireland. And you know, here in the States, everyone thinks that the Irish are just raised on corned beef. And if you offer a good Irishman a green beer in Ireland, they'll walk out, shall we say. Okay. So some of the cultural differences and perceptions are, like everything else, a little bit unique. But I now work here in the United States. The brand is Irishman Speaks. And as a keynote speaker and business facilitator and business humorist, my mission is to improve people, performance, and productivity with a smile.
Which is a great way to do it. I mean, well, it's a great way to do anything, really. But if you're going to do that with performance, so absolutely. Yeah. Do it with a smile.
Yeah. Absolutely, because I mean, we were talking just before we came on, I think. I mean, smiles are infectious, and one of the most basic ways to communicate with people, babies, obviously, you see them smile, you smile back kind of thing. And we don't probably smile and laugh enough. So what I try to do with my messaging is a good, serious content, but one of the vehicles to get the message across is by adding some humor in that presentation.
And how does, I think perhaps on one level it's kind of obvious, but I want to ask the question anyway. How does being a cancer survivor tie into that?
Yes. Well, I have had 2 bouts of cancer over the years, Walt. I've had thyroid cancer and I've had prostate cancer. So I now tell my audiences that having had a thyroidectomy and a prostatectomy, I now have an Irish condition known as there's not much left of me. Okay? But I think in a lot of things, life has silver linings. And one of the things that it has meant for me is that it has opened doors as a speaker to speak to oncology audiences, oncology nurses, healthcare professionals who have a really stressful job and they want to get good messaging, but they also want to laugh. And that also allows me then to speak to cancer survivors who've gone through some of the same kind of trauma and pain that I have got. It also allows me very much to speak to caregivers, because I think what a lot of people don't really appreciate, Walt and Anne-Marie, is that caregivers go through as much emotional pain, and sometimes even more emotional pain, than the actual cancer patient. So I like to try and reach out to them, give them high fives and say thank you for all that you do, and to my darling wife, who was my main caregiver when I was going through those cancers.
Yeah, because you're right. It is a very trying thing to go through. And there are lots of different trying medical type experiences that people go through that they challenge every aspect of your being. But it's not just medical stuff. I mean, there are a lot of things that happen in life that are trying, that just, we feel like we get ripped apart by stuff. So again, that's another reason why this whole idea of tapping into humor is really valuable, especially if you can do it kind of on demand, like whenever you need to do it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, as your podcast, you're talking about happiness, and you've titled happiness. I mean, it is human beings. Every one of us goes through good times and bad times. And when you go through those good times, what I suggest to people is that really appreciate them when you're having that good time. Say to yourself, hey, this is good, life is good, etc. And when I mean, I'm a pretty happy-go-lucky guy, but I also do know that this really good time that is going on, whatever it might be, etc. I said to myself, all right, Conor, appreciate it, because you're going to need that memory in a couple of days' time when life ain't so good. But then when life ain't so good, you can actually think about, all right, life was good, I know it's going to be better again, kind of thing. So it's something that everyone goes through. The experiences might be different, but the emotions that we all go through, I think, are the same, no matter who you are. I mean, people talk about Bill Gates or Musk or the Kardashians having gazillions of dollars, etc. But I mean, a lot of people don't really appreciate this, but I would reckon that they go through the same kind of emotional pain and trauma as everyone else does. They can probably afford to kind of buy more expensive bottles of champagne to try and get over it.
But it
not
also
that I'm suggesting that alcohol is the solution.
No, of course not. Of course not. Right.
Yeah. But it sometimes helps.
Yeah.
But it's also a challenge to just deal with the stuff, particularly in those situations where you're feeling miserable, where you're dealing with, the crap is all rolled in that particular day. Those are the days when, it's good to have those happy memories to lean onto, but it's also the hardest time to actually lean on them, because you're not feeling it that day. I mean, it's easy to lean on a happy memory when you're feeling good. It's not so easy to lean on it when you're not feeling good.
That is true. In fact, just before we came on this call, I do a lot of work with people who are in job search. It's not an income stream, it's just a passion of mine. And I say to people that when you're in job search, and if you've ever been in that situation, Anne-Marie or Walt, I mean, it can be a really painful, frustrating, sad, despondent time, and you don't feel good. But yet at the same time, though, when you're going for that interview or you're going to that networking event, you got to be able to walk into that room, as I say, 12 foot tall and bulletproof. And there are simple little things that you can do to help you get out of that funk. And one example I regularly quote is, I said it today at this webinar I was doing, if you're going for an interview tomorrow, just to make yourself feel better, 2 minutes before you go into that interview or do that Zoom call, Google pandas. Pandas, Pandas. Okay, so you're smiling already, kind of thing. And what happens is that what you want to do is you can fool the brain with some simple little things. And what I suggest to job seekers is that if you can find some reason to put a smile on your face just before you go into that interview, you're going to feel better. And one of the silliest things that puts a smile on people's face is to Google pandas. So it's an example of how you can take a situation where you're not feeling good, but work on it. And when you work on it, it'll help you to feel better. And then hopefully you'll be able to be as productive as you want to be and communicate as well as you want to.
I've told this story a number of times on the podcast over the years, but I will repeat it again because it fits exactly with what you're talking about. My ex-wife had thyroid hyperthyroidism. She didn't have cancer, but she had hyperthyroidism and was told she'd be either on medication for the rest of her life or she'd have to have surgery to have it removed or whatever. And she didn't buy into that. Instead, she started watching YouTube videos of kittens and animals playing with each other that shouldn't play with each other and all this other kind of stuff. And she did that for about a year. And a year later, she was off the medication.
Right.
I mean, and the doctors had no explanation because their explanation was, there's no getting away from this. You're going to be tied down to this for the rest of your life. And she wasn't. Yeah. So the only thing that saved her was looking at the teddy bears and the kittens and the owls playing with the ravens and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. No, I mean that is a really interesting little anecdote, and it's not unusual. There are a couple of well-documented cases where people actually worked on making sure they did something happy or saw happy events each day, and it helped them in their cancer journeys or in other journeys. And I do believe that the question I regularly ask people to ask themselves when they're in a funk or when something goes wrong, they ask yourself the question, what do I want my attitude to be? What do I want my attitude to be? Because if you ask yourself the question, what do I want my attitude to be when things are going bad? You're not going to say, I want to be frustrated. You're not going to say, I want to be annoyed.
Probably not. Depends how frustrated you feel.
Yeah.
But sometimes you just want to be in a funk. Sometimes I want to be pissed. I want to be upset. I mean, sometimes you're there,
That's true. Yeah. But and I mean, there are times, all right, like when you kind of don't use the logic of I don't want to be frustrated or annoyed. But in general, it makes a real difference to how you feel about yourself. And I talk about this and I do some nice little anecdotes, fun anecdotes during my presentations about when things go wrong and how you can ask yourself the question, what do I want my attitude to be? And it will help you to think more positively about whatever went wrong or to help you to get out of that funk some way.
Anne-Marie, I know I've asked this in the past, but I'm going to ask you again. Do you have favorite go-tos? Like you want to do exactly what Connor's talking about. You want to get yourself into a better place and you're not there right now. So you go look at pandas. I mean, do you have a pandas thing that you do?
I don't know if it's pandas, but I do go to YouTube and I listen to a lot of like speakers who I find motivating. And I always get the snippet that I need whenever I need that. Or I go to my kids, I look through the old photos or videos of them being silly and dancing and whatever, and that always absolutely lifts me.
Yeah. I mean, that is absolutely normal, Anne-Marie. I mean, one of the things I suggest to people, I've got the two most adorable grandkids now, two red-headed Irish colleens that live only half an hour away from me. I mean, anytime I want to put a smile on my face, all I got to do is look at those photographs. And that's where I say to people that if you need a lift, if you can identify what it is that makes you feel better, if you can know what that is, you can use that when you need to feel better. So if you're going for that sales call and you're kind of been thrown out of the last 4 offices kind of thing, or if you're going for that interview and you haven't got a job offer in the last 3 months, know what it is that's going to make me feel better as I'm walking into that interview. This whole world is a mind game to a great extent, and you can fool, if that's the right word, the brain when you need it to be positive and upbeat.
It's one of the really interesting oddities of existence that the brain can't distinguish between what you tell it and reality.
Absolutely, yeah. That's why when you go to the horror movie, you're scared out of your life kind of thing. You know it's not real, but it's real to the brain. Yeah.
It continues to amaze me, that faculty we have. I think it ties directly into creativity, but it also makes me wonder, like, where does that come from? Where does that ability to just suspend disbelief, as they say, where does that come from?
Yeah, there's wiser heads than ours don't know the answer to that one, I think, but it is true. I mean, and this is what I do believe is that, I say this to leaders as well, the vibe that you create is going to impact everyone else around you. And whether you're a leader or whether you're actually on the shop floor, just stacking the shelves, the vibe that you create is going to make an impact with your work colleagues and with the customers in the organization. Or if you're on the factory line and you've just got the food processing going down left, right, and center, how you react and interact with your colleagues is going to determine what the environment around you is going to be. You can't change the world, But I do think to a certain extent, maybe a little bit cliche, you can change the world around you.
I think you do. Actually, I think that's becoming better and better documented as time goes on. Well, that's one of the reasons why we subtitled the show Your Daily Dose of Happy, because we know if we're feeling good, we're having a good time, we're interacting, we're doing our thing, energy's flowing, it's going to affect the audience.
Yeah.
In ways that we can't even predict.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's why it's so important, I think, when you're involved in leadership in teamwork, or where you want people to be engaged, that you work at creating the right atmosphere, and you need to appreciate that you can create the right atmosphere. I'm sure each of you in your work life can remember bosses that you had who made everyone miserable. But you can also probably remember the boss who kind of made the environment positive and upbeat, and you wanted to go the extra yard for them. It, to a great extent, through mentoring and through self-examination a lot of the time, you can figure out what kind of a boss or leader or colleague or compatriot that you want to be.
And we've also got the power to react to how we want to react to those people. So if we have got somebody who's a bit of an energy hoover, then just don't sit with them, or just ignore them, or just don't take on board what they're throwing out to you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Energy hoover. I haven't heard that phrase before, Anne-Marie. And I'm sure our American audiences don't even know what a hoover is. It's a vacuum.
A vacuum, an energy vacuum cleaner.
Well, some of us have Hoover vacuum cleaners. We just don't think of it as hoovering, but the phrase has started to migrate over to this part of the world.
Well,
talking about job interviews, I went for a job interview with Dyson, and I said, "Oh, I know about hoovers," and they were like, No, wrong. That's so wrong. We're Dyson. Right. We're Dyson.
Yeah, you got swept out of the place, did you, or something like that? Yeah.
No, I managed to get the job. I managed to wing my way around that one.
Right.
Which goes to show that it actually can work too.
It can, because I'm sure when they were doing the chat later on, they remember Anne-Marie, the one who was talking about the Hoover. I mean. Those little things that differentiate. I mean, in my business, there's a gazillion keynote speakers out there. So in my business, my mission is to improve people, performance, and productivity with a smile. And what I say is I want to leave the audience with a smile in the face and a spring in the step. So the only way I figured out how I might be able to differentiate myself was I said I'd put on this goofy Irish accent. And but I mean, I'm deadly serious. I haven't got it here in front of me, but I talk a lot about branding and marketing and being able to differentiate yourself. And I do tell my audiences sometimes that I realize that I tell my audiences that I come from New Jersey. Okay, forget about a what. You're breaking my chops here. All right, bad New Jersey accent. All right. So I tell my audience I come from New Jersey, but I realized that if I wanted to be successful as a keynote speaker, I needed to differentiate myself. So I realized that Americans love the Irish brogue. So I said I'd get an Irish brogue. And what I actually do is I take out of my pocket, I've got a mouth spray that is branded Instant Irish Accent Mouth Spray. And I tell my audience, I take this Instant Irish Accent Mouth Spray every morning. It gives me this lyrical Irish brogue. And the message is just another way to differentiate the story by just doing something slightly goofy, etc. But quite seriously, twice over the years, after I presented, someone has come up to me and said, "Are you really from New Jersey?" And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, who am I dealing with here? So that mouth spray is somewhere there on one of the shelves behind this camera here.
I imagine there's probably some listeners wondering if you can get that on Amazon. I mean, is it available, in a 3-pack or something like that?
It is, and I'll tell you another story about it. Okay. So I got this Instant Irish Accent Mouth Spray for my darling wife just for Paddy's Day on one occasion. And I saw who was selling it. So I rang the distributor the following day. They answered the phone. And I said, I got this Instant Irish Accent Mouth Spray yesterday, and I've got a major problem with it. So you could kind of hear there, what's going on here? And she said, yes, sir, what's the problem? I said, well, I took it yesterday and the results are permanent. So when I was putting in the order a few months later, she remembered me immediately.
I'm just trying to that.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out how it is you can know it's permanent a day later. I mean, that's how crazy my mind goes. Right, I'll go with it.
Yeah. Well, look, see, I've still got it. I mean, it was only 1 month spray. Look what happened. You see?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I would say that's actually a fairly high endorsement.
Indeed, yes, yeah.
I mean, seriously, it works really, really well. Obviously,
it does. Yeah, and what I've got is the brogue I have got, the kind of lyrical brogue, is actually from County Cork, which is on the south coast. And Anne-Marie, you probably know that a bit like England. I mean, the dialects from county to county are quite astonishing. So
very different, yeah.
Cork, and then you go up to, let's say, Sligo or Donegal, totally different. And in the UK, Lord above, the difference between Swindon and Newcastle is mind-boggling.
Well, I've literally got Wales up the road, 1 hour down the road, and everybody speaks Welsh.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
An hour the other way, and everybody speaks Cockney.
Yeah. And the difference, I mean, I got to say, I love the Welsh accent. I mean, it's the most beautiful lyrical accent. And then as you go through, you go over east, like in speaking Cockney, it's just so totally different.
But I went to school about 10 miles away from where I lived, and my accent was different to my school friends.
Right.
It could be that it's that close. So yeah.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. And it's interesting. I mean, one of the challenges I had when I came over here first, I came over as I was VP of marketing with a company called Best Foods. We were taken over by Unilever. So you'd know the brands, Anne-Marie, Hellman's Mayonnaise, North Soups and Sauces, etc. Thomas's English Muffins over here. I was VP of marketing with them. And actually the same in when I was in Ireland, I worked in the UK for 2 years. And I used to fly out on Monday morning to Esher, was where our corporate headquarters was in London, or just outside London, and I fly back on Thursday or Friday. So what I found was that, especially when I started with the UK business, that I come in on Monday morning and I'd be saying something at the meeting, and I realize people haven't got a clue what he's saying, and you see the eyes glaze over kind of thing. So by Monday afternoon, I'm speaking more slowly and kind of more carefully and articulating the words properly, etc. Then I go back to Dublin on Thursday, go into the office in Dublin on Friday morning, and everyone's speaking like 100 miles an hour. I'm speaking so slowly that I think I've had a stroke. So that's one of the challenges of working in different environments. And I did have that bit of a challenge when I came here to the States as well, just to be careful and aware of your audience. And as a speaker, a professional presenter now, I've got to be very careful on that. I mean, my conversation pacing is a bit faster than my presentation pacing, because especially if I go down to the southern states, Alabama or Arkansas, where they don't talk as fast as the Irish do, I make sure at the very start of my presentations, I start quite slowly and make an even better effort to articulate until they get the kind of feel for my intonation, etc. And that's critical when you're in communication. You need to understand not just what you're saying, but what your audience is hearing.
Yeah. Have you presented in Oregon at all? I'm curious to know, just because in Oregon, talk about differences in speed and in talking. If you talk any faster than this in Oregon, they won't understand a word you're saying.
Right. I actually have. I don't recall that problem. I mean, it was kind of 6-7 years ago. So, but what I do know, though,
They'll smile at you. I mean, you don't get a clear indicator that they don't understand.
But what I do is I make a real effort to try and understand the audience, and I probably was speaking quite slowly there as well. But another interesting thing, and this goes back to communication, it's important to be able to read the audience and figure out whether or not you're getting the message across. So I speak right across the board. If my mission, as it is to improve people, performance, and productivity with a smile, every single organization wants that. And whether they're in Alabama or Arkansas, they want to improve their people, performance, and productivity with a smile. But the kind of reaction you'll get from, my favorite audience is nurses. The reaction I'll get from nurses is much more vibrant and electric than when I'm speaking to a group of, let's say, lawyers, for instance. The content might be the same, the messaging is the same, and I do leave the lawyers with that spring in the step and the smile in the face, but it takes a bit more for them to kind of let it go, shall we say.
Another good reason why you want to know your audience.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one of the secrets I've got to knowing my audience is I'll do some research on the audience, and AI now has helped a lot in terms of understanding the audience better. But one of the very simple ways I suggest to people, if they're pitching for a piece of business, or if they're a speaker pitching for a piece of business with an association or a manufacturer, particularly associations, get onto the association website, find their blog. Don't worry too much about what's written in the blog. Read the comments and the audience reaction. Because now what you're getting is for some of them, you might be getting 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900 kind of comments. That's what really gives you the feel for the audience you're speaking to. The one person writing one blog is giving one person's opinion.
That's a really cool hack. I like that.
Isn't it?
Yeah. It works.
Because that ties you in directly to the culture of whatever environment you're speaking to. Because they're going to speak in that particular venue. That's the culture they're going to be addressing, is their own.
Yeah. And the vast majority of those comments are related to some pain points that people have got. So what I do is I try and take some of those pain points and give them thoughts and ideas as to how they can address those pain points. And sometimes I can do it with a little bit of humor as well.
Well, that's going to just be motivating, isn't it? Because you're tailoring it to what they need. And if they can hear that in some kind of positive form and ways and different way of thinking, because you know what it's like, if you're really angry about something, you just get lost in it. And there could be no way out. So if somebody's giving you humor and a new breath of fresh air, but you know what you're talking about because you're relating to your audience.
Yeah, and it's just really the simple things. The example I often quote, and I've used it a few times, is I speak a lot to healthcare, Nurses Week, nurse leadership, healthcare professionals, etc. And the main software in the healthcare environment here in the United States is called Epic, EPIC. Okay, so it's kind of well ingrained now, but when it came out a few years ago, it was just driving people crazy. So I remember one client telling me it was going through what are the challenges that they've got, and the nurse navigator said that, well, this whole Epic software is driving them absolutely crazy, and they just are feel as if they're spending all the time trying to understand that and not being able to look after their patients. So I was doing the presentation to all of the nurses, and maybe an audience of about 270 or 280 people in this hospital group. And I said, I know so many of you have so many difficult challenges. In fact, I understand your challenges are almost of epic proportions. So that simple little thing, like, just really resonated with them. They realized, hey, this guy understands some of the pain and frustration that we've got. But that happened because I made efforts to understand the audience, the problems and the challenges that they've got by talking to the leadership and to some of the people who were involved in the organization before I went on stage.
Well, it also occurs to me that you mentioned that you were addressing pain points, but you were also addressing laugh points, happy points.
Yeah. And see, that's the paradox. some of the, I tell people, Walt, that you don't have to be funny to be funny. And they kind of go, what did he say? He said, I'll tell you what he said, okay? He said, you don't have to be funny to be funny. And by that, I mean, in the last, there's different kinds of research, but researchers suggest that adults laugh or smile about 15 times a day, okay, on average. So over the last week, that means that you've laughed or smiled about 100 times, okay? Now, you probably don't remember any of them unless it was a really raucous piece of humor, etc. But what I suggest to people is that when you laugh, take a note of it. You don't know when you're going to use it, but you might be able to use it at some stage. When you make a comment, and you're in the communication business, so if you make a comment that puts a smile in someone's face, say to yourself, I could use that probably when I'm doing a podcast on Tuesday or Wednesday as well, kind of thing. And what I encourage people to do is to just, the concept I've got on adding humor to your presentations, an online course I've got a concept called, well, I'll ask the question. If I say something to you, Anne-Marie, that I think is funny, I'm looking for a 5-letter word now, okay? If I say something to you that I think is funny, what do I hope that you will do?
Laugh.
Laugh. Very good, very good. Laugh is the acronym for 5 lessons or concepts that you can use to add humor to your presentation. Oh. And if I've got time to, I don't want to be dominating the conversation here.
No, well, that's why you're here. We love having guests who dominate. Just as long as we get to talk occasionally, that's all we really ask.
Who is that guy you're with there, Anne-Marie? All right. Right. So laugh, it is about, the acronym spells laugh. The first one is listen. All right. And basically here, what I suggest is, in the last few days, you've said something, heard something that either you made people laugh or they made you laugh. Record it, write it down, listen to it, is what I say, okay? And as I say to people, I put it into my iPhone, and I don't know when I'm going to use it or if I will ever use it, but I've got it there. And when I'm scrolling for an idea about some program on, let's say, for manufacturing industry or for food service industry, I can flick through that and say, hey, that little anecdote will work there, okay? So the next element of the laugh acronym is A, and A is for antidote, which is about storytelling. Sorry, what? Antidote is not storytelling.
Anecdote, I believe it is.
Oh, it's anecdote. Oh, anecdote. Right. Okay, let me clarify so then, as I say here, Walt, okay? The good antidote to a poor speech is a good anecdote. Okay.
There you go.
Right. So I've got my PowerPoint slides and I put antidote up and I leave it up there for a couple of seconds. And you see the audience going, this guy hasn't got a clue what he's talking about. But A is for anecdote. And the basic idea here is that if you think about over the last week when you did laugh, or consider over the next few days when you laugh, what will probably make you laugh is not really jokes. I mean, jokes will make you laugh, but not most of the time you're laughing is generated by a joke. It's an anecdote or a little quip. And the funniest anecdotes, which is where we come to the U in the laugh acronym, are when you were uncomfortable at some stage.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So let's say you're telling your friends about something that went wrong 2 weeks ago down at the supermarket. When it happened at that stage, you were kind of frustrated and annoyed. But now you're telling your friend about something humorous related to it. The friend is laughing. It might get exaggerated over a period of time. But if you capture the anecdotes where something went wrong and use them at some stage, they're the ones that are actually the funniest ones. When you're at the water cooler or at the coffee shop, you're laughing with your friends about stories. It really isn't a story where something was brilliant. Yeah, it's a story where something went slightly wrong. So it's the antidote to a poor speech is a good anecdote. Okay, right. So we got listen, anecdote, uncomfortable. G is for Google, or the Googler as I refer to it. Okay. And I suggest that if you're looking for something to add humor to your presentation, what I tell people, Anne-Marie, is to Google on the Bing. Okay. So if you Google on the Bing, That's actually a phrase I heard from my brother-in-law in Cork about 10 years ago. I thought, Google and the Bing. Hey, that's a little bit funny kind of thing. Yeah. So I now use that. But, you know, the interesting thing about that one, short aside there now for misdirection here. I was back in Cork last year and I used that phrase when I was with my brother-in-law, Finbar. And he kind of laughed at it and I said, I heard you say that 10 years ago. And he said, did I? There's proof. I listened and I just been able to use it ever since, kind of thing. So that's what I mean. You don't have to be funny to be funny. You just capture the humor around you, write it down and record it and listen to it, and you never know when you're going to use it. So we got listen, anecdote, uncomfortable, Google and the Bing. And what you Google and the Bing for is, let's say you're doing a presentation on leadership, okay? So Google for something like humorous quotes about leadership. What Mark Twain said about leadership. Oscar Wilde said about leadership, or something like that. Or funny quotes about leadership. And you probably come up with one or two quotes that you can use, and you can give them credit for it if you wish. You probably, in a regular speech, you mightn't have to, but I think it makes sense to give them credit. Another simple little example is, you need to be a little bit careful on this, but I mean, in company events, etc., if you just look for images, humorous images about leadership, funny cartoons about leadership, funny cartoons about leaders, kind of thing, and you can probably use those as well, drop them in. And what you're now doing again is you're not creating the humor, you're capturing the humor all around you. And if you just drop in 2 or 3 of those little slides into your presentation, it can make a difference. I'll give an example of what I love to quote. I speak a lot to healthcare, as I said, and the poor people in healthcare, they've got to go on these continuing education courses every year, and they are designed to do their brain in. I mean, they're mind-numbingly boring. I remember I was at one event and some neurosurgeon, some brain surgeon was speaking, and this guy was so bad, I just prayed for a lobotomy, I tell you. Right. So, no, by the way, I knew you would laugh at that, but I actually do use that line pretty often now. But there was a presentation, he was a brain surgeon, and the nurses were at the back of the room doing their knitting. I swear to God. All right? I knew how bad this was going to be. But at the same healthcare event, though, a younger doctor came up and he said, I've been taking some, I've been on a Toastmaster course, so hopefully I'll be able to do a pretty good presentation here. But I was told that if I put up a humorous slide, it would actually make the audience laugh. The guy was an orthopedic surgeon. He put up a slide of a humorous bone.
Oh, dear.
The audience loved it. He said, this is I was told to put up a humorous slide, so he's putting up the slide of a humorous bone. It was brilliant. So that's just what I mean by the simple little examples. He didn't create that humor as such, but he probably had the brains to think it through. But that's a simple little example again. And if you're doing presentations to a group, getting them to smile or laugh 2 or 3 times in that presentation is going to help you to connect better with them. So we've got listen, anecdote, uncomfortable, G and for Google of the laugh acronym. And the last one is H is for he to ho, ho, ho. And the idea here is that if you say something slightly funny, you get a reaction to it. Say to yourself, I got a he there. Is there some way I can go to a ho, ho, ho? And if you get used to that kind of thinking, you will find some way to get to that ho, ho, ho. And might be something by just adding a word or taking a word out or typing up a little bit or exaggerating a little bit. But it's a simple way, again, to just get the audience to pop more. And if you're in sales, I really do believe that having a little bit of humor in that sales presentation is going to grease the potential for you more positively in terms of closing that sale. That applies anywhere, but humor lifts people, and that's why I think it is so important.
Agreed.
I love that. Yeah. By the way, I can add something to your G
Right.
You mentioned Google and Bing. Take advantage of artificial intelligence, ChatGPT and so forth, and just type into one of these. I've been using the Gemini Advanced, which is the new Google.
Right. Yeah.
And I'll just say, give me 3 funny stories about walking down the street, and it'll give me 3 funny stories about walking down the street. And then I'll say, well, are these real or did you make them up? Oh, I made them up. Well, give me some true stories about funniness walking down the street. It'll do that. I mean, you don't even have to do the Google anymore. It'll just tell you what it is.
That is true. And I told people previously that coming from Ireland, we have been well used to AI for so many years, because growing up in a farming community or a village in Ireland, AI meant artificial insemination. So, so actually, the list. I mean, on the Twitter, as I call it, Twitter or X, I have a lot of different lists, and I've got a list of a lot of people who are good at the AI. So the name of that list is actually AI Not for Cows. Okay.
Good distinction. Yeah.
So. But it's true. I mean, Googling can be a really powerful way for you to add humor to your presentation, and you're not creating it. You're just taking humorous slides or humorous quotes, etc. And all you need is 2 or 3 of them in a presentation for people to, which kind of breaks the monotony, the pacing, and to just put a smile on their face. And when they're smiling, they're paying more attention to you.
And it works. I mean, not just for a presentation, and almost anything that you're doing a human interaction on. It's going to work.
Yeah.
And so, if you're finding something funny and you're reacting to it, you're going to remember what triggered that. Whereas if you're just talking in a monotone voice, I'm just going to zone out and not listen, and it's not going to stay in there. But if you give me a reaction, I'm going to remember that.
Dead right. I mean, it does make a big difference. And as I said previously, that if you can be a leader or a work colleague who just makes people feel better by putting a smile in their face once or twice a day, or once or twice a week even, you're going to be appreciated more. You're going to have a better work environment as well. And as I said previously, you don't have to be funny to be funny. You just need to pay attention to that LAUGH acronym, which I talk about in my course on adding humor to your presentation.
You have that as a course then?
Yeah, I've basically just launched it as a slow launch at the moment in the last week or 2. The details are available at my website on Irishman Speaks. So it's something that I think has real potential as a revenue generator, if we're just talking pure business, but it also has real potential for organizations and sales organizations who want to just differentiate themselves a little bit better from the. Bless you.
Bless you.
Yeah. So yeah, we've launched the program, and now we're just hopefully we'll be laughing all the way to the bank, Walt.
Sounds good to me. I like that. Yeah.
Sounds good to me too.
Actually, what you're describing is what you do if you want to be a successful podcast host. I mean, the first L, especially the listen part, you start with that for sure. I mean, and then I actually did want to be funny at first. I realized that I wasn't funny when I was trying to be funny, so I stopped being funny and I was funny. And the way that worked was basically listening and not trying to be funny, just interacting with whatever it is that my guest or my co-host was saying. And then over time, the humor just kind of comes out because you're paying attention, because you're listening and you're responding to what you're hearing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just in a sense, it's a kind of a discipline after a while. I mean, what I actually say to people when they say, how do I write a humorous speech? I say, start off by writing a speech. Don't try and make it humorous, because you'll struggle at that. But as you write the speech, the Toastmasters, for instance, has this humorous speech competition in most of the clubs and areas and regions, that kind of thing. And I'm still heavily involved with Toastmasters here in the Chicagoland area with a professional speakers group. But what I say to people is, don't try and write the humorous speech initially. Write the speech, have the little message in it. Now figure out how you can improve that by dropping in a couple of extra words, a little bit of exaggeration, adding that anecdote that you had actually put into your iPhone 6 months ago that you didn't think you would ever use, kind of thing. And that's how to develop the humorous speech.
Yeah, I love that. The listen followed by the anecdote, the LA of your last acronym. That's exactly how you do it. You start with the listening and you go very next step. What are the anecdotes? What are the stories that get associated with whatever it is you're talking about? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That combination, just the LA only, and I'm not talking Los Angeles, just the LA only is just that. If you learn that part, I mean, the rest of it is great when you learn that too. The U, the G, the H, especially the Googling part. But if you just start with the LA, that alone will get you there.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, I'll give you a real world example. I speak to manufacturing organizations, safety conferences, etc. And I say that my definition of safety is not one I created. I heard it somewhere sometime. Is that we want you to come into work with 10 fingers and toes and leave with 10 fingers and toes. Okay. Now to do that, you've got to be aware of your surroundings and not take things for granted. So let's assume I'm speaking to you as a manufacturing group. You're interested in safety, etc. So you've got to be aware of your surroundings. A couple of weeks ago, my wife and I went to collect our little darling granddaughter from soccer practice. Okay. We collected Maggie from the soccer practice, put her into the back seat of the car, and Maggie's mother, Amy, my daughter, drove off. And we had Maggie in the back seat of the car. My wife sits in beside Maggie, and then I decide I'll sit in beside Maggie as well in the back seat of the car. So after a couple of seconds, Maggie realizes that, Grampy, you should be driving the car. And I say, no, I want to stay here. Grampy, as only kind of a 5-year-old little red-headed Irish colleen in Chicago could say to you. So I said, okay, I'll drive the car. So I get out of the car. It's on child lock. We are stuck in the back of the car. And I'm thinking, oh, jeepers. So we actually had to phone Amy, my daughter, to come back and open the back door for us so we could get out of the car and drive it away. But here's the point for you as a safety audience or a manufacturing audience where safety is critical. That what happened there was that I was not as aware of my surroundings as I should have been. It wasn't a critical issue there. But for each of you in your work environment, you have to be aware of your surroundings, and you've got to be aware of how your colleagues are interacting with their surroundings as well. So that's just a simple little example of how I took a little anecdote that was marginally uncomfortable. That one really wasn't. But that I taking that anecdote, I know I can use it for safety conferences, for manufacturing conferences, etc. And the other thing I like to do is I try to leave people with mental triggers. So what I will say to that audience is I say, all right, all of you ladies and gentlemen here, you're driving home this evening. Some of you might be collecting your 4-year-old kid from the kindergarten. When you're putting that 4-year-old kid into the kindergarten, remember, all right, the Irish Guy story about child lock, be aware of your surroundings and bring that to the workplace tomorrow. When you're driving to work tomorrow, it's quite likely you'll see a kid in the back seat of a car strapped up. Say to yourself, child lock. I got to make sure that our metaphorical child locks at work are in place or not in place, etc. So it's not just the message on the day that I try to leave people with. It's mental triggers that will remind them of the lesson that the Irish Guy gave a couple of days ago, a couple of weeks ago.
What you're describing is the tremendous power of association.
Yep. Yeah, most definitely. Yeah. And that's how we remember things. I mean, ideas pop into our head that we've totally forgotten, but something springs that to life, etc. And that's what I really do believe. I regularly work on leaving mental triggers with my audience that they will remember next week, the week after, kind of thing.
Yeah. In fact, that's something that, regardless of whether we are a speaker or presenter or just somebody who interacts with other human beings, it's a great skill to develop. Because when you can develop that association skill, because that's what that is, you associate a child lock with safety in a workplace, for instance.
Yeah.
When you can start building those associations, you become an effective person. I don't care what your career is. I don't care what your lifestyle is. You become a more effective person simply because you draw associations.
Yeah, I mean, we learn from our experiences. If we sometimes they might go to the back of our brain, but if we can bring them out from time to time, it's going to help us to be able to survive, basically, I suppose, in life. That would be the best way of putting it.
Especially given that it's one of humanity's greatest skills to be able to associate. So why not use it? Why not put it to work?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is good stuff. Really good stuff. It's amazing, too, how simple all this stuff is. I mean, you came onto the program with the idea we are your daily dose of happy. You like being part of a happy type program, a happy type situation. But those associations are really what drive all of that, isn't it? I mean, the association we have between happiness and feeling good, or the association that we have perhaps between not feeling good and what it's going to take to feel good. Those associations, they basically define not only our lives, but our way of understanding our lives, our way of understanding our perspectives on our lives. And the more that we are able to delve into them, the more that we're able to associate them, the more we're able to get through whatever it is we're trying to get through.
Absolutely. And one of the things I do say quite regularly to people who are going through difficult times is that to try and think back on something that made you feel good previously. That's one thing that I think helps a little bit. I mean, these are only minor building blocks, but if the more building blocks you can create, the better you're going to feel about yourself. Another simple one I suggest is that if something positive happens today and puts a smile on your face or makes you feel good, take it in. Say to yourself, hey, this is good. This is positive. I got to remember this for tomorrow and the day after, because tomorrow mightn't be so good, but it'll help me to feel better. And then tomorrow, when I don't feel better because something has gone wrong, I'm able to remember the positive I had from yesterday. The brain, as we were talking about earlier, we can fool the brain. We can nourish the brain to. There's a line in the food service industry: you got to be at the table when you're at the table. If you're a server or a waiter, and if it's the same in the rest of life as well, when you need to be someplace with the right attitude and come in with a positive vibe around you, you can make it happen. Now, it may only be for the 45 minutes you're making that sales call or that interview, but that's when you need it. And when it's finished, you might go back and feel, oh my God almighty. But I mean, you've done it when you need to do it. We can work the brain to feel positive and motivated definitely for short periods when it is critical.
And I think we should also mention what here on the program we often call the momentum of vibration or a vibrational alignment, which is if you can get yourself into a pattern of, we're talking about feeling good or finding something to feel good about. If you can get yourself into a pattern of feeling good, the pattern kind of takes on its own momentum over time. It becomes a new pattern, so that perhaps before you were in a pattern of depression, if you can keep making the shift, make the shift over time, the depression becomes hard to do. The feel good becomes easy to do, whereas before it was the other way around. That's because of that momentum factor that takes over.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, I think I speak a lot also about micro goals and the power of micro goals. And when we achieve a goal, we feel better about ourselves. But if we appreciate that life isn't always a bed of roses, oh my Lord, whoever came up with that idea, life isn't a bed of roses, and things might go wrong sometime, and sometimes it can be really painful and terribly sad, demotivating, depressing, etc. But there are ways that you can build and climb out of that if you decide you want to do it. And setting yourself basic little micro goals, I think, is one of the ways to help you along that journey. Now, I'm not saying it's easy, but if the way I address this sometimes, Anne-Marie, is I speak a lot to people in job search, as I think I might have indicated. I've done so many podcasts now I can't remember whether in this call I made that comment or not. But what I do say to people in job search is you go through a really frustrating time. But there's two ways you can look at the job search. When someone says to me that they're unemployed, I say, I don't want to talk to you. No, I rephrase it slightly differently. Okay, I say that is what I actually say, Anne-Marie, you'll appreciate this, having experienced a lot of the Irish people. The Irish people have no problem with profanity. Okay.
Yes.
But there's one word that I think is profane, and that is unemployed. And job seekers, yeah, I just get a visceral reaction at this stage when someone tells me they're unemployed. That says you're a victim. You're in job search. You're in job transition.
Yeah.
And if I'm in job transition, I have a different mindset. Again, it's about fooling the brain. I have a different mindset to if I'm unemployed. So the first thing I say to anyone I'm working with when they tell me that they're in job search or they're unemployed, I say, that word is not allowed in our vocabulary. And it drives me crazy when I hear job coaches and career coaches use it, because I just think it is a word that should be banned from the vocabulary of the job seeker and from the coach who's helping that person as well. I understand why the government uses it, but don't tell me a job seeker should be using it.
Well, it's not even an accurate word, really, because to be unemployed in its literal sense means to have nothing to do.
This man
I mean, there isn't anybody who has nothing to do, absolutely nothing to do.
Yeah, that's right. Chris Christopherson has a line in one of his songs that says, you must have been reading my mail. And that's exactly what I say, Walt. I said, if you're not unemployed, you're doing the hardest job you've ever done. But you're just not getting compensated for right now. But the benefits are going to come from it. So don't tell me that you're unemployed. You're in job search, and it's a tough job, but it is work that you're doing. It's just the benefits aren't there right now. So you're absolutely right. Completely agree with that.
You're also describing self-employment, by the way. There's a lot of time in self-employment where you're not being directly paid for and compensated for what you're doing, but you're still employed, you're still working, and you're hoping for that day where you do get compensated for it. That's why you're doing it.
Chris Christopherson had a line one time, you've been reading my mail, and that's the way I feel.
Oh my God, there's two of you.
Yeah. Because I mean, as a keynote speaker, the keynote or the presentation is only just a 45-minute or 50-minute kind of thing. I didn't have anything last week. This week, I'm just basically working on building and a lot of marketing, following up with clients, etc. The next few weeks are quite good. But I mean, people would say, you're having a wonderful time. You only just do this, this, and this. But I mean, there's so much involved in making it happen, developing content, marketing yourself, etc., positioning yourself, getting new videos out, etc. It's like the soccer players. You think you're only there for 90 minutes playing the soccer, but I mean, for 4 or 5 days beforehand, they've been working their guts off to make it happen. So self-employed is the best job I've ever had. I like my boss, but it's got variables in terms of revenue generation at times.
Yeah, and that's the challenge. What we're really talking about here is what's your perspective going to be? And it's reminding me of something. I think it was Abraham Lincoln actually who said this, and I'm going to have to kind of softly phrase it because I don't remember the exact quote, but the gist of it is there are people who complain that roses come with thorns, and he likes to remind people that thorn bushes come with roses.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good.
Yeah. It's but that phrase actually, I've heard it from a few other different sources though, but it's absolutely true. It's how you look at it. Is the glass half full or half empty? And I say, people say, you're obviously a glass half full guy, Conor. And I say, actually, no, I'm not. I'm a glass half empty guy. And they kind of look and say, you don't look like that. And I said, well, think about it. If I'm inside in a pub and the glass is half full, I can't order a pint. If the glass is half empty, I can put in a new order for a pint. So it depends how you look at it, as you're saying, Walt.
That's right. Yeah, that perspective is everything.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, we've really enjoyed your perspective. There's been no doubt about that. A couple things we need to ask you about before we part company. First and foremost, you mentioned the website before. You mentioned the little thing that you have on there, but tell it to people again. How do people reach you? How do they find out more about what you're
down there's Irishman Speaks, okay, is the website, and irishmanspeaks.com. That's probably the best way to connect with me. I've got contact details there. I also have a lot of videos on the YouTube which is where we are now. And the YouTube channel is Irishman Speaks as well, all one word. So if anyone wants to connect with me, they can do it through my website, irishmanspeaks.com. I'm on LinkedIn as well. We can't see it here, but Conor is actually spelled with only one N, Conor. I tell American audiences, Walt, that my parents couldn't afford two N's in Conor, so that's why we're going with the one here.
That's a good explanation. I like that.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
That works for me. Second thing I want to do, and this is something I've been doing for the last couple of years because I noticed it a few years ago, and I said to myself, this is something we need to kind of do a shift on, because you, like all the people who come onto the show, I mean, you do this podcast, you've done other podcasts, I'm sure. You probably put out all kinds of different social media comments and posts and all kinds of things like that. And you do it because you're a giver. You want to help people. You want to give back to the world. And we often kind of take that for granted because we never really see it. Like, there are a lot of people listening to this, hundreds of people listening to this podcast, and you never see what they take away from it. You never see how it plays out in their lives, but you're affecting them for the better and you're not getting credit for it. And I'm saying, well, that doesn't make sense to me. So on behalf of those people you've never met and you've never seen, never will meet, never will see, thank you for what you're doing, because you're making a difference in this world. Yeah,
I appreciate it. Thank you for a very enjoyable discussion, Walt. And Maria, might see you in Swindon at some stage for playing them. And hopefully it'll only be a cup game though, okay?
I was going to say it'll be a while.
Yeah. All right.
Well, thanks, actually, I do one more thing. Before we finish up an episode, I always do one more thing. I always ask my co-hosts, because my co-hosts are really good at this, I ask them to pick the one thing that stands out more than anything else from the conversation we just had in the last hour, as kind of a way to tie it all together with a bow. So Anne-Marie, what's the one thing that you're latching onto that says, yeah, that speaks to me, as that's how I summarize what we talked about for the past hour?
So I think what stood out for me personally is I think we're all we can always focus on how busy we are and what we've got to do and blah, blah, blah. And I love that, having that laugh and taking that laugh Polaroid. Take a Polaroid of that moment and remember it and put it in there, and it's stored in your bank then. And I think that was a really good tip for me. So that's what I took.
That was a good one. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, and I actually love the phrase Polaroid. I'm sure the Gen Z won't have an idea what it is, but actually it's a very good way to describe what we're talking about.
They're back in fashion. They're back in fashion, yeah.
Good stuff. I love it. So thank you very much, Conor. We appreciate you so much. Thank you, Anne-Marie, and thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.